Hello and welcome. This is a comprehensive introduction to Regulation EU 2022-2560, also known as the Foreign Subsidies Regulation, or FSR. This regulation is a key measure for the protection of the European Union's internal market. Today's session will be a 2-hour deep dive into this important topic. Here's our agenda for this comprehensive training session. We'll spend the first 15 minutes on an introduction to the FSR, covering its purpose, objectives, scope, and key definitions. Next, we'll take a 45-minute look at the mechanisms of the FSR, including notification obligations, investigations, assessments, and remedies. After that, we'll have 30 minutes to discuss the impact and implications for businesses, member states, and third countries. We will conclude with 30 minutes on practical considerations, where we'll go through case studies, scenarios, and best practices for compliance. So, what is the Foreign Subsidies Regulation? Let's start by understanding its purpose and core objectives. Essentially, the FSR is a comprehensive EU regulation designed to address foreign subsidies that create unfair competitive advantages and distort the internal market. Its primary objective is to ensure a level playing field within the EU by preventing these distortions caused by financial contributions from non-EU countries. The regulation has several key features. It introduces mandatory notification requirements for large mergers and acquisitions, and for companies participating in large public procurement tenders. It also grants the European Commission the power to investigate foreign subsidies on its own initiative, known as ex officio investigations. When distortions are found, the FSR provides for redressive measures to fix the problem. Importantly, this regulation complements existing EU state aid rules, which only apply to subsidies from EU member states. The FSR closes a gap by addressing subsidies from non-EU countries that were previously unregulated. Its scope is broad, covering all economic sectors and activities within the EU. Why was this regulation necessary? The FSR was introduced to address specific market distortions and fill regulatory gaps. The core problem was that financial support from non-EU governments to companies operating in the EU created an uneven playing field. These subsidized companies could offer artificially low prices or make strategic acquisitions that other companies couldn't compete with. This left EU companies facing unfair competition. The existing EU tools were limited. State aid rules only cover subsidies from EU member states. Trade defense instruments are limited to imported goods, not investments or services. And WTO rules only cover goods and require lengthy state-to-state disputes. A significant regulatory gap existed. There was no control over foreign subsidies for activities in the EU market, no oversight of subsidized mergers and acquisitions, and no regulation of subsidized bids in public procurement. The FSR was created as the solution to fill these gaps. Now let's dive into the scope and some key definitions. The FSR applies to all economic sectors. Economic activity is defined broadly as any activity involving the offering of goods or services on a market. A foreign financial contribution is a key concept. It's a financial contribution from a non-EU country that confers a benefit to a company, is specific to certain companies or industries, and could not have been obtained under normal market conditions. A market distortion occurs when a foreign subsidy improves a company's competitive position and has a negative effect or a potential negative effect on competition within the EU's internal market. The regulation sets specific thresholds for mandatory notifications. For M&A transactions, a notification is required for concentrations valued over 500 million euros, where the companies involved received foreign financial contributions of at least 50 million euros. For public procurement, it applies to contracts worth at least 250 million euros, where a bidder had received at least 4 million euros in foreign financial contributions per third country over the past 3 years. The notification must be submitted with the tender, and it is the responsibility of the economic operators, their main subcontractors, and suppliers. Failure to notify can result in the rejection of the tender. How does the Commission assess foreign subsidies? There are two main types of investigations. Notification-based investigations are triggered automatically by the mandatory notifications for M&A and public procurement. Ex officio investigations can be launched by the Commission on its own initiative, based on information from any source, market intelligence, or complaints. In its investigation, the Commission will look at several distortion indicators, including the amount and nature of the subsidy, its purpose, and the market conditions. Some subsidies are presumed to be distortive, such as unlimited state guarantees or subsidies that directly facilitate an unduly advantageous tender. The process involves a preliminary review, followed by an in-depth investigation. This leads to a balancing test, where the negative effects of the subsidy, like market distortion and unfair competition, are weighed against potential positive effects, such as the development of the subsidized activity or benefits for environmental protection and R&D. Based on this, the Commission makes a decision. The possible outcomes are a finding of no distortion, the acceptance of commitments from the company, or the prohibition of the transaction or imposition of other remedies. When a distortion is found, the Commission has several tools or redressive measures to address the problem. These measures must be proportional, effective, and feasible. These can be commitments offered by the company, such as repaying the subsidy, reducing capacity, or offering access to certain infrastructure. They can be structural, like requiring the sale of assets or prohibiting a merger, or they can be behavioral, such as imposing non-discrimination rules or pricing constraints. In M&A transactions, this could lead to prohibiting the deal or requiring divestiture. In public procurement, a subsidized bidder could be excluded from the contract. The Commission will monitor the implementation of these remedies and can impose significant penalties for non-compliance, up to 10% of the company's annual worldwide turnover. What is the impact on businesses? The FSR introduces significant new compliance requirements and strategic implications. First, compliance. Companies will need to conduct thorough due diligence to map all foreign financial contributions received over the last 3 years and assess whether they meet notification thresholds. This requires robust documentation and internal processes, including training and dedicated compliance teams. There are also risks and challenges. Businesses face regulatory risks like investigation delays, potential prohibition of transactions, remedial measures, and financial penalties. The new rules can also add complexity and costs to strategic planning. However, there are also strategic opportunities. The FSR aims to create a level playing field, which can lead to fairer competition based on merit. It can protect access to the EU market and provide more security for investments in procurement opportunities. It may also incentivize companies to focus on innovation and efficiency to gain a competitive edge. Let's finish with some practical examples and best practices. Consider an M&A scenario. A Chinese state-owned enterprise wants to acquire a German automotive supplier for 600 million euros. Over the past 3 years, it received 80 million euros in state loans. Both the transaction value and subsidy thresholds are exceeded, so a mandatory notification to the European Commission is required. Or a procurement scenario. A EU member state issues a tender for an infrastructure project worth 300 million euros. One of the bidders has received 5 million euros in foreign subsidies. Again, both thresholds are met, and the company must submit a notification along with its bid. Some common pitfalls to avoid include overlooking indirect subsidies, miscalculating the 3-year reference period, or submitting a late or incomplete notification. To navigate this, best practices include conducting comprehensive due diligence and regular compliance audits. It's crucial to have a good timing strategy, performing an FSR assessment early in any transaction or bidding process. And finally, ensure you have coordinated, cross-functional teams that include legal and regulatory specialists. The key takeaway is that proactive compliance is essential.